There is this subgenre of crime thriller that, as a resident of a small Midwestern town, really has a way of pulling me in. Small-scale, localized corruption is more intriguing to me than wide political thrillers with legalese bouncing off the walls of a Pentagon boardroom. The easiest comparison to Rebel Ridge, as said even by its director Jeremy Saulnier, is First Blood. People tend to conflate Rambo with far more hyper-masculine and violent filmmaking, mostly due to its sequels solidifying the name Rambo with big, over-the-top action movies. But First Blood, if you've seen it recently, is a much slower burn than you'd think. Rambo just wants to live in peace in the mountains and is forced to fight for his life by a corrupt small-town police force. It's important to remember.
They drew First Blood, not me.
I'll be honest, this movie really snuck up on me, as does anything Netflix releases, since their approach to marketing is basically non-existent. You go to the homepage, and if there's slop in the slop bowl, let's slop and distinguishing between good and bad on Netflix has become very difficult for me, and the only way to really make good choices is by knowing the filmmakers. That giant inn sometimes brands movies as forgettable slop that otherwise would have had a successful theatrical release based on the creative voices involved. In this case, we have the great and talented Jeremy Saulnier, director of, personally for me, modern classics such as Blue Ruin and Green Room, and I even liked his last outing for Netflix, Hold the Dark. Shit, even his first film, Murder Party, I watched years and years ago. I've been a fan of this guy's style for a long time. The Letterboxd description reads, "A former Marine confronts corruption in a small town when local law enforcement unjustly seizes the bag of cash he needs to post his cousin's bail." Hold the Dark was 6 years ago, and this movie has been in the making for nearly the same amount of time. Apparently, John Boyega was originally cast as Terry Richmond but left production, and thank God he did, because otherwise we wouldn't have gotten such a calling card performance from Aaron Pierre. Mid-sized sedan, ever f***ing heard of him?
Let me see that laceration.
Man, that's assault, man!
He is so surprisingly good in Rebel Ridge, and who knows, Boyega is a good actor as well. It's not like he would guarantee a bad or worse performance, but Aaron Pierre stepped up to the plate and hit it out of the park here. I'm gonna tell you my favorite part about this movie, the best trick that it pulls. If you've seen other similar movies to this, you most likely expect at some point for this guy to strap up, crack his knuckles, and start ripping throats out.
Throat lozenges.
You're gonna want to take the whole box.
Awesome! Got another throat rip in.
You expect him to go law-abiding citizen on these cops and blow up a cruiser or torture some heavy for information, but Rebel Ridge does something else. This is one of very few movies I can think of that pulls off a pacifist run in a revenge thriller. No kills. Terry Richmond, our lead, breaks someone's arm, and that's about the most damage he does. But don't get it twisted, this still clings to that exploitation B-movie nastiness. It's propulsive and violent. It just accomplishes that through far more creative storytelling methods the genre would usually call for. The entire movie is our hero easily manhandling these cops using non-lethal methods, and it's incredibly badass. The movie makes you hate these cops through their bullshit procedure that allows them to seize assets under nothing but suspicion, and it's somehow legal. Especially in these tiny towns with smaller police departments, there have been stories of cops doing exactly what they do in Rebel Ridge to people just passing through. The money and property they seize is fed back into the city and provides funding for the local government. I don't know enough really to argue in the comments about the legitimacy of these laws. It's just some stuff that I was reading. It's rare, but it does happen, and this movie really nails down that realism. Terry and Chief Byrne, the villain played very well by Don Johnson, have a conversation about de-escalation and how police have used the term to justify its violence. Terry clearly sees de-escalation as a means to peace, finding common ground, talking it out. Chief Byrne sees de-escalation as essentially stopping out violence with larger violence. If both parties want de-escalation, why is one shooting at the other? And such is the way revenge thrillers often go. Fight fire with fire. Kill all the killers. But Rebel Ridge is so compelling by flipping that usual dynamic. Terry isn't out for blood, he just wants answers. It was so satisfying to see him dig and dig and dig to make some sort of sense out of this broken system that's robbed him of his life and future. Having these government workers try and explain themselves away to Terry is both cynically funny and kind of fascinating. More guns are disassembled by Terry than they are fired, and somehow Jeremy Saulnier makes it all the more dope for it. This movie has just a sturdy way of surprising you. For example, I thought the main drive of the movie would be Terry trying to get his cousin out of jail. That is not the case. I also thought certain characters would help or hurt our main character's efforts. But as the film goes on, you realize that Saulnier has put far more thought into the depth of these characters than the genre would have you assume. Corruption isn't black and white, and I think the most harmful form of it thrives in the gray. Just a couple little things. I think the way the runtime feels on Netflix wasn't too bad. It's 2 hours and 11 minutes, and it moves at a clip for about 80% of that. When I'm just rotting on my couch, I don't really care when the movie is this good, but there's a little bit of fat that could be trimmed in the middle. But hey, I mean, same. And the imaginary 100-minute theatrical release in my head is a half-star better, but it didn't matter too much ultimately. Anna Sophia Robb is in this. I haven't seen her since she died on that bridge. She was so good in this movie, and I was so surprised to see her that, again, Saulnier has really shaped these characters with a lot of thought and detail. I wasn't expecting her to have such a dense story, but we get a lot about her. And to be clear, we have no idea about any of these characters' history or backstory, but through these performances and the screenwriting, we can infer a lot about them, but not enough to predict the choices they make along the way, which is a really hard thing to pull off. You know, in a perfect and just world, I would have sat down and finally watched Seven Samurai and then made a video about that, or Ghost Dog, or something, but the world is corrupt, and I didn't want to watch Seven Samurai. I watched Rebel Ridge instead, where corruption is very real and the devil is in the details. I loved it. Just what I needed to get out of my little case of creative blockage. Shout out Rebel Ridge, shout out you guys, shout out Green Room. If you have not seen it, please do, and if you have, is Green Room still his best movie? I haven't decided. Let me know what surprised you most about Rebel Ridge, whether that's in regards to the filmmaker and how this differs from his other work, or just about the plot. What literally surprised you about how this story plays out? Like and subscribe, whatever, if you want. Bye, guys.